I'm talking to a prospect, and in addition to saying, I'm a $700,000 a year brand and I want to get to be a $5 million brand by 2030. If they can tell me how much of that revenue is going to come from new customers as opposed to existing customers, I know I'm dealing with a sophisticated person who's thought about this a lot and is probably going to have a leg up in the competition. Their supply chains might not be organized. They might have a bad product market fit. I can't judge those things. But if they could tell me what percentage of the revenue they want to have come from new customers versus existing customers, I know I'm dealing with someone who's pretty sophisticated and pretty smart and has a really good chance to succeed.
Welcome back to another episode of the We Live to Build podcast. Today's episode is with Brook Shepherd, the CEO and managing partner of Mason Interactive, a performance marketing agency based in New York that helps brands to grow to 40 million and beyond. He works with schools and D2C brands. We talked about a number of things like how he looks at potential clients, how he thinks the tariffs will affect the D2C brand's ability to thrive, and much, much more. So if you're interested in sales and growth and a little bit of politics and global economics, then this is a fantastic episode for you. Let's get to it. What makes you so passionate about growing brands?
There's nothing more exciting than being part of a successful journey alongside an entrepreneur. They can be a serial entrepreneur. They can be a first-time entrepreneur. But realizing the satisfaction of realizing that you are part of growing something is deeply gratifying.
Why is it that you prefer to help other brands grow rather than focus on growing your own brand? Obviously, I know your company is something you're working on growing, but it's different.
Yeah, I don't see them as different. I mean, I have a $30 million self-funded agency, completely bootstrapped in a low margin services business. We can charge a little more than someone can charge doing it internally, but not a lot more, or would go out of business. Our profit margins are constrained. And I take great satisfaction in having built the company to this point. And I often find a point of friction sometimes with prospects when they say something along the, and I don't have friction with you, but it's a good question. Someone will say like, well, I've grown a company. What have you done? Well, I've grown a company too. It's just I sell time and people and the process and not a widget. Although that could change. And one day I may decide to start a direct-to-consumer brand because I have plenty of ideas.
Why are you still doing this company? Surely you could sell it to a large PE firm and walk away with a significant amount of that.
Yes, and I have those conversations. I still enjoy it. I'm 49 years old. I think about by the time I'm 55, being able to not work 12 or 14-hour days, 6 days a week, and focus more on some other things. But the truth is I enjoy it. I enjoy the people I meet. I enjoy how fast-paced the industry is, and I enjoy learning new things.
I had actually stopped doing the podcast last August after 4 years. And in January of 2025, I was so bored of not talking to other business owners all the time that I decided to do the podcast again, because it brings me this kind of satisfaction that I need to be able to just ask people questions and learn from them and be curious that I can't do, because in Portugal, where I live, a lot of my friends work for other people. So in my offline life, I don't really have access to many business owners, maybe 2 or 3 in Portugal, and my other entrepreneur friends that I'm really close with live in other countries. And so the podcast is really my way to be able to kind of scratch that itch, if you will. So I definitely understand why you're continuing to do it. I think helping people is a very interesting thing to do because everyone is different. Everyone has different ideas and different ways of living and doing. And that is exciting for me to see why people are different. How do you navigate your clients' differences of opinions?
I have a stock answer for that. I don't know if it's a good answer, but my answer to that is it's not my job to do what a client asks. It's my job to give my client my best advice based on billions of dollars of assets under management and 16 years of doing this and hundreds of brands. It's my job to give them my best advice and then do what they ask. So navigating it for me is simple. If a client says, I want to go up, I want to increase revenue by 40% this year, and I can say, great, why? How fast do you want to get there? Are you taking on outside investment? I think the analogy we use is client says, I want to go up. We say, great. I can take the stairs. We can take the elevator. I've got a jetpack in the back if you want to get there very quickly. Let's talk about how quickly you want to get there and why you want to get there. And then ultimately you do what the client asks, unless it's really, really wrong. And then it's not a good fit and you mutually part ways. So there's not a lot of conflict about that. It's more like they all have their own way of doing it. And it's my job to apply the best practices I've seen to help them in the best way I can.
How have you had to change yourself to continue being able to exist in your role as the owner of this company?
One is that I didn't used to need to have salespeople because I could do all the sales. And what we found as we grew bigger and I grew older was that I don't always resonate. As a proud Gen Xer, I might not resonate with a millennial the way I would hope, and they might not resonate with me. So part of the way to do that is to have a bigger team around you that can support you and be self-aware, hopefully, of my own gaps and my own gaps in my knowledge and my own biases and my own personality defects, which I try to be aware, and then surround myself with people that can fill those gaps, and hopefully I can help them fill their gaps as well. So just being aware of what I'm doing and who I am and what my failings are, which I think a lot about. The other part is it's just very dynamic. When I started doing this, online advertising really meant search keywords on Google, Ask Jeeves, Yahoo, Bing, Seven Search, Dogpile, Lycos. It was all search. And then social came into play, and that didn't really work super well in the first 2 or 3 years that it existed, and having to learn those tasks and to understand that the processes I followed 16 or 20 years ago don't work now because of automations, and realizing that new things have to unlock. It used to be that if you were a more sophisticated bidding person, if you knew how to game the algorithms in Google better than the next person, you could be successful. That's not the case anymore. And if I were still clinging on to that, I would have been out of business a long time ago. So analyzing what works in myself and analyzing what works in the business, surrounding myself with people that hopefully fill the gaps I have, and then adapting to the data that we see in the market is the most important thing.
You said something really important, that if you continue to do the things that you used to do, you'd be out of business. How has the tariffs affected your business in terms of getting clients, keeping clients, or helping clients continue their growth path?
On Friday, I was talking to a client from the UK. They were in New York, and we were talking, and they were saying that they were thinking about pulling out of the United States. I wouldn't be surprised if more people said that. I think what's different now as compared to 2020 is a few things as to help clients navigate it, right? This week of 2020, the world was bedlam. We were all locked at home, at least I was in New York, and we were all doom scrolling. And something like 40% of our business evaporated overnight. Sean, when I started the company, I made a dream list of clients I wanted to work with, and one of them was a shirting company, a made in America, manufactured America shirting company. And we worked with that client. And then we worked with them in 2018, 19, 20. And in 2020, they said, we're giving up. We don't want to go direct to consumer anymore. We want to go to, we just want to survive so we can support the haberdasheries that got us here and come out the other side of this. They did not. They ended up having to sell the business. So what we learned in 2020 was, which was much more, the big difference between 2020 with COVID and now is that we actually have more certainty now. And I'm trying not to be political in this answer, but everyone's got the same tariffs. So we all know what's happening, whether we like it or not, whether it's going to be good or not. Those are separate issues. But all the clients are operating under the same conditions. Whereas in 2020, no one knew what was going to happen. What did happen in 2020, and said, how do I help clients get through it? I talked to them about this. In 2020, what happened was a lot of people, not just our clients, pulled out of the market. That reduced competition in a supply and demand environment on the advertising platforms. So there were less people buying advertising. And then alongside that, there were more impressions in market because everyone was at home doom scrolling. And this is before any PPP loans came in or any other loans came in or government assistance. So the people that stayed in market got more impressions at a lower cost per impression, and they were able to succeed. Now, it took stomach to do that. But we have clients that grew 80% that year, 90% that year, almost doubled that year, because they were able to have the stomach to stay in it and weather the fact that we're going to come out of this okay. And they got more eyeballs for a lower cost. I've been talking to clients about that over the last 2 or 3 weeks. I don't know if that's always the answer they want to hear, but that's my reality is we're all in this together. Everyone's got the same tariffs applied to them, basically. I know it's different for different countries, but basically we all know what's happening. And we have history to say that people are going to pull out and advertising should get cheaper.
I would love for advertising to get cheaper, because trying to advertise to Americans is incredibly expensive, almost prohibitively for some people, depending on, what they're trying to promote. What do you look for in a potential client? What's something that they say or do when they come to you that tells you immediately that this is someone who could be successful? And I guess this question is meant to be answered for someone who's looking to grow their own business.
The biggest thing that is, to me, an indicator of the ability to be successful is not revenue targets, because everyone's got revenue targets. They might be made up. They might be plotted on a graph that goes up and to the right indefinitely. But not everyone has specific goals around new customers, right? This is how many new customers I want this year. If I'm talking to a prospect, they've all got revenue targets, but if I'm talking to a prospect, and in addition to saying I'm a $700,000 a year brand and I want to get to be a $5 million brand by 2030, or 2029. That's a typical thing that come into our door. If they can tell me how many of those are going to come from, how much of that revenue is going to come from new customers as opposed to existing customers, I know I'm dealing with a sophisticated person who's thought about this a lot and is probably going to have a leg up in the competition. Their supply chains might not be organized. They might have a bad product market fit. I can't judge those things. But if they could tell me what percentage of the revenue they want to have come from new customers versus existing customers, I know I'm dealing with someone who's pretty sophisticated and pretty smart and has a really good chance to succeed.
Do you think people are thinking about expense management right now? Or if they are, what are they doing right? What are they doing wrong? If they're not thinking about it, why?
I think they have to be, because all the products are going to be costing a whole lot more today than they were a month ago. So I think they're definitely thinking about it. My pitch for that is that my fees haven't gone up. So if everything else in your ecosystem now costs 30% more because you're importing from China, well, congratulations, I don't cost 30% more. So I'm actually efficient. And we have a whole business model around not really raising fees for clients and making sure that we can maintain continuity for a client. We have clients that are paying us the same rate now that were paying us 6 years ago. And it's because of the way we manage the business. So yeah, I think everyone's looking at managing finances right now, but we try to be part of the solution and not the problem.
Were you aware that earlier today, the US increased the tariffs by another 100% on China?
There's challenges all the time. I started this business in 2008. 2020 was a serious issue. The other thing because I mentioned earlier, I think I mentioned that about half of our clients are D2C companies and about half of our clients are schools. And I will die on the hill that is a benefit for our customers, that about 60 clients and half of them are D2C and half of them are schools, because they can learn from one another. And I was in Chicago last week talking to a bunch of clients and trying to talk about how they can learn from one another. It's interesting because one of the schools I was talking to has made a serious effort in the last 6 years to bolster, I won't say what it is, but a certain degree they sell, which is, for whatever reason, demographically no longer interesting to Americans. And the way they've done that is invest in overseas enrollment. So they've got people coming from around the world to fill their fairly niche, good career outcome, college program that they're selling. And that's drying up. And they're aware that it's drying up because at this school, at least, as of last week, their applications from overseas were down. The good news is they're aware of it and they're working on it, right? They're not pretending it's not happening. They're not going to be, it'll be fine. Like I'll talk to a college without giving it away, I'll talk to a land grant university in the United States in the West, and they'll say enrollments are down for the last 10 years in a row. And I'll say, okay, well, you called me, like, can we talk about a plan to fix it? And they'll say, ultimately, no, I'm not going to try to fix it because I believe the government won't let us go out of business. That's crazy. Of course the government's going to let you go out of business, especially in the current environment. Yeah, the government doesn't care. So I think that the first thing is to acknowledge it. But let me ask you, why do you think what do you think? A third of startups, a quarter? Like, what is your guess about who's going to fail because of tariffs in the next year?
Hey, just give me 10 seconds of your time. I really appreciate you listening to the episode so far, and I hope you're loving it. And if you are, I would love to ask you to subscribe to the channel, because what we do is a lot of work, and every week we bring you a new guest and a new story, and what we do requires so much love. so that we can bring you something amazing. And every week, we're trying really hard to get better guests that have better stories and improve our ability to tell their stories. So your subscription lets the algorithm know that what we're doing is fantastic. And no commitment, it's free to do. And if you don't like what we're doing later on, you can always unsubscribe. And either way, we would love a like if you don't feel like subscribing at this time. Thank you very much, and we'll take you back to the show. It's clear to me, or at least my belief, that an American tech company that's selling a software won't have a sales tax applied for someone overseas buying that thing. So I think tech companies, software companies, will be fine. What I have started to see is people in Europe, for example, say, I don't think I want to work with American startups anymore. I think I'm going to find Chinese, I think I'm going to find European companies that are doing the same thing. The quality of service may not be so great, the ability may not be so great, but I'm going to promote European stuff. And I don't blame them. These D2C brands, these physical products are far more in danger of being screwed. But what's shocking to me is not only has Trump completely misread China, but he's also completely misread how what he's saying and doing is actually giving China the ability to become the only superpower in the world.
That is the position of that's the position of the Economist newspaper, that's what's happening, and that's their view of what's happening. Yes,
I haven't read The Economist. That's just my own experience and knowledge of the world, and it's hilarious because a few years ago, I was of the impression that China was going to be really screwed because Biden, Trump started the trade war. Biden was pushing the trade war even farther. And then Trump came back in and was going to make it a lot worse for China. But by pulling out of the World Health Organization, the Paris Climate Accords, the World Trade Organization through these tariffs, not to mention bullying the hell out of all of your allies, he's making it possible for Xi Jinping to take advantage of this vacuum by going, hey guys, look at us. We're not going to do any of that stuff to you. Come play. We'd love to talk to you. We'd love to have your money, and we'd love to invest more money of ours into your economies. Unfortunately, Xi Jinping doesn't play so nice, even though he makes it look that he does, by I don't know how much you know about the way they operate, but basically they invest in physical infrastructure projects where they need to have a Chinese company and Chinese employees come in and do it. And they do it right. They do it for free, but in exchange for like access to your gems and your lithium and other mines and taking control of your infrastructure, basically in that regard. And it basically indebts people to them, which is kind of what happened to Sri Lanka. And they've done it to dozens and dozens of countries, and now they're going to have the ability to do it to a hell of a lot more because the US is pulling out from the global environment. So I'm sure Xi Jinping is quietly just going, this guy is such an idiot. I can't believe he's making it so easy for me to do what I've been wanting to do, which is to make the world a Chinese world. And all I can say to that is, I am so glad I speak Mandarin.
I have two sisters. One is a French citizen and has lived in France for many years. The other is a Swiss citizen and has lived in Switzerland for many years. So they identify as European. They have European passports, European houses, European spouses, European businesses. And if I say to them, well, hold on, if I say something that I think is pretty innocuous, like one of the things I don't like about what's going on in the current environment is that since World War II, America, the United States, has been the leader of the free world, whether that's through overfunding NATO or through benevolent trade policies or for having nuclear arms, whatever the reason is. The United States has been in charge of the world order since World War II, and that's worked out pretty well for me. And I have a vested interest in keeping that going. I think that's a fairly reasonable thing to say, but it does not go over well when I'm talking to my European family. They're like, "What do you mean you've been in charge of the world order since World War II? Is it debatable?" But the thing that gets me though the most is what makes I almost said a phrase. What one of the things that makes the United States stand out is the quality of our education system at a higher level. So people come here from all over the world to go to Harvard and to go to Stanford and to go to wherever else. And if that goes away, because it's not our healthcare that they're coming for, and it's not our natural parks they're coming for, and it's anyone who's been to Paris or London and taken the subway from the airport to downtown of those cities and tried to do that in New York and taken the AirTran from JFK. It's forever. It's not our public infrastructure. It's not the quality of our lower schools. It's a business friendly environment with a really great higher education system. And if we decide to turn our backs on the rest of the world and say that, okay, we don't really want you to come to our schools unless you think exactly what we think, and if you don't act the way we want, we're going to deport you. That has to have a negative effect, as I'm seeing it happen in some of my clients. It has to have a negative effect on the world's perception of our education system, which is like our crown jewel and why people come here. And that to me is deeply worrying, more than a lot of other things, honestly. I can see some good in some of the policies the administration's doing. Not a lot, but some things I think I can see are good there. But the idea that we're going to sort of throw away the idea that people come from all over the globe to better themselves here at our universities and say, no, we don't want them anymore. That to me is very troubling. But I got a vote, I cast my vote, and I don't get another vote after that, and I don't get a say in it. So all I can do is adapt to it and help clients navigate the waters.
I live in Europe in a place where people are pretty open minded, but even then, they still look at me and they're like, what the hell is your country doing? And I'm like, I live here. I don't consider myself American. Like, sure, I can understand what America is doing. Like, I keep up with what's happening in the country. So I can explain to people from an American's point of view why things are happening, but I can also understand, as someone who's lived half of my life outside of the US, why the things that America is doing is so ridiculous.
I think about my own journey as an entrepreneur and running this business. I think about things that were cataclysmically difficult over the years. I think about my biggest client firing me by text message when I was on a family vacation with my wife and son on the way to Cape Cod, where we go every year. I think about one of my key colleagues, a woman named Betty, who now runs internal marketing at Electronic Arts in California, quitting. There's more of them, but I think about these huge things that come down, or clients just not listening and saying, "I haven't heard you for the last 6 months, and I'm now going to do exactly what you told me to do, and blame you for not having done it earlier." I think honestly, as an entrepreneur, I think a lot of people that aren't entrepreneurs might say, "Well, time to give up," or "Time to reevaluate," or wallow in it a little bit. And I believe very strongly in just picking yourself up and just left foot, right foot, one foot in front of the other, walk forward, do what you can, pick up the pieces and go. Doesn't mean you shouldn't self-evaluate. Doesn't mean you shouldn't think about why that client fired you over text message. Doesn't mean you shouldn't think about why Betty left the company. But like, you can't wallow in it. You have to move on. And we all are in this. I mean, we all are in the same boat here. And so if I have four, it's probably the accurate number. If I have four candle brands in our portfolio, or three soap brands, which is probably right, they're all going to pay the same tariffs. They're all going to be paying the same. All of them are going to have to raise their prices by the same amount. And the consumer, I mean, either they're going to eat into their margins, which is possible, or consumers are going to pay more, or it could work out that it works out like President Trump wants it to, and that things are renegotiated and things go back. That seems like a not impossibility, by the way. The idea that the administration would want to have a win, because I think you and I might agree that the administration likes to talk in terms of winning and losing. And I think it's very possible we'll get some concessions from Vietnam, or concessions from, you mentioned, Sri Lanka or wherever. They'll get some concessions, and they'll hold a press release saying, "Look, it worked. We got our concessions and we won. The tariffs are back down." I don't think that that's an impossibility in this market, but it's affecting everyone the same way. It's not like it's just affecting soap companies and not affecting car companies. It's affecting everyone. So all you can do is keep trucking on, man.
What's something I haven't asked about that you feel like we would be missing out on if I hadn't asked?
New customers were important. Why? And I don't know that this is the cause, but it certainly correlates. In the current interest rate environment, private equity firms that run startups have demanded over the last 3 years what they call efficiency. And by efficiency, they almost always mean higher return on investment, higher return on ad spend, higher ROI, whatever the metric you're using is, they're almost always saying more of that. The way you do that, the way that gets done, and businesses are catching on, which is good. The way you do that is you focus on existing customers and you say, I want to sell more suits to the person who's already bought a suit, or I want to sell more soap to the person who's already bought soap from me in the past. That is the way you get your most efficient return on ad spend. However, if we are spending money only on advertising to existing consumers, by definition, we are not getting new consumers, and our business will go into a death spiral, and we will efficient ourselves right out of business. And I have seen over the last 3 years many businesses efficient themselves right out of existence and not have any understanding about why it was. I thought we were being so efficient. Our ROI was up over every month. It was up. What happened? And they weren't listening to the signposts. So unlike my client that I mentioned, the school that's aware of the fact that they're having a problem with incremental enrollments from overseas, these people weren't aware in general, a bunch of them, of the fact that they were efficienting themselves out of business. So ROI is great. You need to have an ROI focus for your business to run, and total revenue is great. But really focusing on how many new customers you need to get and realizing they're going to cost more than reselling to existing customers, because they are. They're just, it costs more to introduce yourself to a new person than it does to sell something to someone who's already bought from you. Realizing that fact is a great marker for success in small and medium businesses.